Hi, this is Anthony. Welcome back to the Honda Snowblower Enthusiast channel on YouTube. Today we're going to be doing a video on Honda servicing, service positions, and this video was suggested by member Jacob Foy Ada. Thank you, Jacob. This is a great suggestion. Let's get to it. All right, first of all, it's really important to learn service positions. It will make servicing your Honda snowblower so much easier. This is a service position which I'll show last, but first I want to show you what is suggested to do before you do the service positions. Honda dealers recommend that you drain the oil so you don't create hydrolock, which we'll discuss some other time. Um, Hydrolock is caused by oil or gas or water getting into the cylinder, and then you can't pull over your engine. But to prevent that, we're going to do two things. First of all, we're going to shut off the gas, start the engine, and let it run until it stalls. Then after you do that, take your starter cord, pull it until you feel resistance, and that closes the valves. That way oil won't go into the cylinder. So once you've done those two things, you can use your service positions. But if you're doing a whole service, just drain all the oil, remove the key, put a note on the machine that there's no oil in it, and you're going to change the oil anyways. So do that first if you're going to do the whole service. Now, once you've done all that, then you can put the machines in the service position. So I'll show you the first one. Here's a 724 I got yesterday as a trade-in for my 928. And this is a position I use very beginning. You lay it back on the handlebars. Sometimes you need a counterweight like a put on the handlebars to keep it back. From this position, you can do many things. First of all, you can replace your shear pins. You can check your impeller bearing by pulling on the. You don't have to remove the augers. I just did this to show you. But you can pull on the impeller and see if it moves. Too much play, you may need a new impeller bearing. The impeller bearing is right on the other side of the bucket, on the back side of the bucket. You see, here's the race of the bearing. If you have to change the bearing, you have to take the bucket off, and these three bolts are the bearing keeper. It's pretty easy, but I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes what you can do. You can replace the auger housing guard. You don't have to remove the augers to do this, but that's another thing you can do. If you have bends on the ends on your augers, you can straighten them out. You can do some touch-up painting inside. If you want to install an impeller kit, you can remove the augers, but that's not necessary actually. You can remove the chute like I did here, and you can use an extended drill bit to drill the holes in the impeller. That's a whole nother video. From this position, you can remove your augers and reinstall them. It's really easy. Only takes about 5 minutes. First thing you do is you remove your impeller shear pin. If it has a bracket, then you remove these two bolts, and then you remove the bolts on the sides. On both sides, you got three 10 millimeter bolts, and then you got a 12 millimeter bolt here. And once you've done that, it just pulls right out. And you don't have to do this on a service. Most services shops do have some shops have 16 points. Other shops have a 24-point service. And it doesn't really mean that you only have to do 24 things. If your machine's been kept up it might only need those things. If it needs parts replacements or other stuff, sometimes the service point can be 2 or 3 more service points. But while the augers are in the machine, you can remove the shear pin for the auger, and you can make sure that your auger turns like this. If it doesn't turn, then you've got some rust and corrosion in there that's holding the auger welded onto the auger gearbox shaft right here. And in that case, I would suggest pulling the augers apart, cleaning out the shafts, and applying some anti-seize grease. That's a good off-season project to do. Another off-season project would be installing an impeller kit. Previous owner put these pads on it. You can do it both ways, like I mentioned in articles. You can do it through the chute, where you don't have to remove all this, or you can remove this, remove the impeller with this bolt here, and put it in a vise and drill some holes. That's what I do anyways. Because when I take it all apart, I'm servicing the augers also. So that's basically on this position. You do those things. I also removed the belt cover to show you the belts. Here's your auger belt. It's the fat belt that drives your augers and your impeller, and this small belt is your dry belt. Now, contrary from what you've heard from a lot of people, you do not have to split the machine or remove the bucket to replace this dry belt. It's fairly easy. Not easy the first time you have to do it, but if you've done it a couple of times, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is this is a guide. You pry that out a little bit. You can take off pull the auger belt off here, and then you can pull your dry belt off, and it slips out from the bottom. That's a whole nother topic, but I'm just showing you this is where your belts are, and an easy way if to replace the dry belt. If you have to replace this belt, in most cases, Hondas, you do have to remove the bucket. And at the same time, I always replace this impeller bearing. Since you have it apart, you might as well, okay? Uh, these impeller bearings could last 15, 20 years sometimes. Then they slowly start going bad. So from this position, you can do this stuff. And you can also remove the bucket if you have to. It's not a service point on a Honda service, but it has 3 bolts on each side and 2 bolts on the top and the bottom. And then you remove this, which is really easy. A 12 millimeter nut underneath. You remove the nut, pull this off, remove your 10 bolts, and then the bucket comes right off. So if you're removing the augers and removing the bucket, this is the best position to make it easier to remove and then replace. Now, I usually remove the augers before removing the bucket. You don't have to, but it's easier on my back. It's lighter. So once I take all this out, the bucket's a lot lighter and it's easy to take out. Let me think if there's anything else you can do from this position. Really not much. Not much else, but that's plenty. That's how I start a service on a Honda snowblower. This machine here belongs to a neighbor. He bought this machine from me. It's a 928 4 years ago. He wants me to service it for him. After 4 years, it definitely needs a service. A lot of the lubrication points are dry. This is called the on-nose service position that we're always talking about in articles. As you can see, I've got a 6x4 that I lay the bucket on there. Keeps it nice and sturdy. Some people might say, you know, put it on the lay it on the chute, but I'm pretty sure that's going to damage the chute. So I use a 4x4 or a 6x4 or something. From this position, you can get a lot done. You can get over half of your service points done. And I'll start at the top here. This is underneath your control panel. You got your clutches that I've spoken about, your lever clutches, which needs to be lubricated. You've got your cables. You've got your cable boots, which you can pull off and spray some chain or cable lube down the hole here and work the cable back and forth. It takes a little bit of patience because the hole is so small, but you can spray some cable lube in there. Keep on working your cable until there's a bunch of cable lube down your sheath. You can also re- change your, if you had to change your cable, replace the cable. This is the position you would use. You've got a little cotter pin here that you pull out, and then you just pull out this little pin, and the cable's released on this end anyways. Same with this one. You've got your lock nuts, your lock nut for your adjustments on here, and here. And you can loosen the lock nut, pull it out after you've taken out the little pin here, and the cable comes right out. Here's your auger and your drive cables, the same thing here. You've got your boots. You can pull the boots off, spray a little bit of cable lube down there. On the side, you've got your cam lock cover, which I already took off. It's really easy. You got a nut here and a bolt here. You take that off, the cover comes off. Here's your cam lock. You know, people are always complaining. That was one of the main issues this past winter, where this handle didn't lock down as it should. And the reason being is usually this cam lock is frozen from dirt or ice or whatever. All you have to do is lubricate it. Here's a spring, lubricate it, and then work your cable lock and then pull down your handle and make sure it locks in. You have to pull down your drive handle at the same time, and then it locks. And then as soon as you let go of your drive handle, this unlocks. It's a safety feature, so your augers are never moving when you're away from the machine. As soon as you let go of your drive handle, this handle pops out, and your lock pops out, and the augers stop. So you can do this in this service position also. Um, Moving down, if you have a problem with your recoil starter, you can pull it off. There's 3 little bolts, just 3 tiny bolts. You pull it out, and it comes right off. What you can do here, your spring is inside there. You can lubricate inside. Lubricate your spring, work your cable. Not your cable, work your starter cord a bunch of times. And usually that fixes any kind of problems with in my experience, it fixes most of the problems. There are a couple other issues where the rope is hanging way out. That's another topic down the road. But that's a good service point that you can do. Moving down, you've got your height adjustment pedal on I'm talking about the older Honda HSS models have the height adjustment pedal down here. I don't know if you can see. I grease the collars on both sides to make adjusting a lot easier. You can work the pedal back and forth until it works well. On the side, let me see if I can do this one-handed. With the pedal adjusted all the way back, you can access the nut, the bolt. Sometimes this is missing, and you have to replace that. Or you make sure you on a service you would tighten that. Make sure those bolts on both sides are tightened, and that's pretty common actually for them to loosen up. But in the position of this height adjuster, you can access that and replace that bolt if necessary. Underneath, I don't know if you can see it, the springs. You got a spring on both sides. You want to make sure they're okay. If they're all bent or too loose, then you have to replace the springs. Um, Moving down, here's where you can adjust your housing guard. Some people call it a scraper blade. I usually call it a scraper blade, but it actually is not supposed to scrape. Um, this is where this is called a housing guard. It's very easy to adjust. You loosen the 5 nuts here. There's 5 nuts, and you loosen your side bolts. And once they're loosened, then you can adjust it. I already adjusted this one. It was flush with the bucket, so now it's about a 1/4 inch below the edge of the bucket. Most shops do a lot more because they know, as I do, that most owners don't adjust these, so they overextend the housing guard to be on the safe side, because if it's not adjusted correctly, you'll start scraping the bottom here. And if you look at this bucket, it's almost perfect. There's no damage at all. This is a beautiful bucket, and a little bit of damage, but on really bad, if you don't adjust this housing guard, the bottom of the bucket is going to scrape, and it's going to start curling up and curling up. And in this position, if you have that, you can fix those curls with a hammer or a chisel or something. You can push the curls back, flatten them up against the housing guard. Usually that's what I see. I'll usually see damage on these buckets because of that people do not adjust them. And after you've adjusted your housing guard, then you can adjust your skid shoes, which I will show. It's pretty easy. All you have to do is put some painter sticks underneath the machine when the machine's on the ground. Put the pedal in the middle position, and then adjust your shoes down to the ground. So your shoes are actually scraping. It's not the housing guard. If you keep your machine properly adjusted down here, this could last 25, 30 years. So you keep your skid shoes adjustment. They will do the scraping, and it'll be about a 16th of an inch off the ground. It really depends on the surface of your cleaning area. Excuse me. So after you've got this all done, you can put it on the ground, adjust your skid shoes. So that's what you do with this service position. One other thing, when the machine's on the ground, you can check the deflection of the track. You push it down here in the middle. It should be not more than 3/4 of an inch or an inch or so. If it's too loose, the track will come off. If it's too tight, it will cause excessive wear of the track. So if you find that your machine tracks need to be adjusted, this is where you do it. You got your adjustment studs right here on both sides. You loosen them both up and or tighten them down, but you do on the underside of the stud, there's a lock nut. And so you need to loosen the lock nut if you need to tighten up the tracks or loosen it. So you loosen up the lock nut, and then you can tighten this down if you need to tighten your tracks. And what I do is if the studs are the exact same, sometimes they're replaced, so you have a different height. I measure from the end of the nut to the end of the stud, and I try to make each adjustment exactly same. If you got one track is too loose, and one track's too tight, the machine will track in the direction of the tight track. So you'll pull one side or the other. Sometimes that's the issue, where your tracks are out of adjustment. One last thing you can do in this position, I usually recommend this for people with a little bit more experience, is doing an in-frame carb cleaning. I already moved the top plate and the air box, and from here you can clean out your carburetor without removing it. In most cases, you can do this. If you've got a carburetor that's really bad, it has to be removed, disassembled a little bit, and put into an ultrasonic cleaner. But most times, what I do is I do the in-frame cleaning first and see if that helps. If that helps, then I don't have to take it off, see? But from this position, you don't have any gas in it because we already ran the engine until it stalled out with the gas off. So the gas is off here. So I can take it. This is your sediment cup. You remove that first. See what kind of dirt is in there. Clean it out with carb cleaner. You clean the inside with carb cleaner. Here's your bowl. You remove it here. This is a drain plug. You can remove your bowl, which I should have done to show you, but you can remove the bowl and then remove the float, which is really easy. And then you can spray some carb cleaner in all the holes. You turn your gas back on, uh, spray some carb cleaner down these holes here. If I don't know if you can see them because the light. It'll be another topic. All these service points, I'm going to do a video on each service point. I'm just showing you in this video the service points in general, the service positions, what you can do in each position. But to get more involved, we'll do a specific video on the service points. Now it seems like it's overwhelming, but it's really not. If your machine is kept maintained, a good Honda tech or shop technician can do a service in about 45 minutes to an hour. If it hasn't been serviced in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or never, then you're looking at more money. Or if you're having a shop doing it, it's going to take more time. It usually takes me a couple hours. I do a more thorough service than any other shop. If parts need to be replaced or the carburetor needs to be removed, or if the machine's been neglected and there's a lot of rust and it can take a lot longer. It can take 3 or 4 hours. It can take a couple of days. But I don't want you to think that this is a very, very extensive, laborious process. Once you start learning all these different service points and learning how to do them, it'll become easier and easier and faster and faster. Okay, here's the last service position that I use. From this position, you can change your oil. I removed the muffler so I could show you the in case you have to remove and replace your spark plug. From this position, you can check your track adjustment like I already showed you. You can do this is your valve cover. I do not recommend you remove this and adjust the valves unless you know what you're doing. That's really not for most people. I mean, mechanics can do it. It's not really too hard, but for most of the members here, which are just regular Joes and gals, this is mostly just basic stuff. And also, from this position, you can adjust your cables. Your cables underneath the control panel. This is where you adjust your cables, your auger and your drive cable. And you can adjust them in this position. And you can also remove this is a cam lock cover that I was showing you on the other machine. You can be removed, cleaned out, and serviced from this position. And you can remove your shooter if you have to, and remove your bucket if you have to. It's not part of a service. It's only all the extra stuff that we were talking about earlier. Let me think. I probably missed some service points, so I expect you guys to comment, make suggestions in the comments below. If you think this video helped you, please like and subscribe to the Honda Snowblower Enthusiast channel. And thank you very much. See you next time.